Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Victoria Newman, Audra Charles, Claire Grace, and the entire Newman and Abbott orbit forever, as a single DNA test detonates years of lies, manipulation, ambition, and heartbreak, revealing that Audra is not just another cunning player in the ruthless corporate chessboard of the young and the restless, but Victoria Newman's real, biological daughter. A revelation that sends shockwaves through every relationship and exposes Claire's carefully constructed web of deception at last, because it all begins quietly, almost innocently, with Victoria sensing that something about Audra feels strangely familiar, not just her sharp intelligence or her relentless hunger for power, but the way Audra reacts under pressure, the way she masks vulnerability with icy control, the way her eyes harden when she feels dismissed, and Victoria dismisses it at first as projection, as ego, as the universal truth that ambitious women often mirror one another, yet the feeling gnaws at her, growing stronger with every confrontation, every alliance, every betrayal, until fate intervenes in the most unexpected way through a routine medical situation, a blood test connected to a health scare that forces Victoria to confront her own mortality and her past, leading to a moment where a doctor hesitates, a file is rechecked, and a question is asked that should never have needed asking because the markers don't line up the way they should. And suddenly a sealed adoption record, a whispered rumor from decades ago, and Victor Newman's long history of secrets collide in a way no one can stop, and when the DNA confirmation finally arrives, it lands like a nuclear strike, proving beyond any doubt that Audra Charles is Victoria Newman's biological daughter, stolen not in the traditional sense, but erased through manipulation, lies, and the calculated cruelty of people who believed they were protecting power, legacy, and reputation, leaving Victoria shattered as memories she thought were settled resurface. With brutal clarity, including a pregnancy she was told she lost, a hospital stay clouded by trauma, and a period of her life she had locked away because it hurt too much to question, and now the truth is undeniable, and Victoria's initial reaction isn't joy, but devastation, because she didn't just lose a child once, she lost her twice. Once to the lie and again to the years of distance filled with resentment, rivalry, and misunderstanding, while Audra, upon learning the truth, doesn't collapse into tears or run into Victoria's arms, because Audra Charles has survived too much to allow herself that kind of vulnerability, instead responding with controlled fury, with a bitter laugh that masks profound pain, because everything she believed about herself, about why she was abandoned, about why she had to fight so hard for every scrap of respect and power, suddenly shifts, and the realization that Victoria Newman, the woman she both envied and despised, is her mother forces Audra to confront emotions she has spent her entire life burying, including a longing for validation and a fear that she was never truly wanted, and as mother and daughter stand on opposite sides of a revelation neither of them asked for, Claire's role in the entire nightmare begins to unravel, because Claire, who built her identity on half-truths and carefully curated lies, knew far more than she ever admitted, having discovered fragments of the truth long ago and choosing to manipulate it for her own survival and ambition, using Audra's ignorance and Victoria's blindness as shields while she positioned herself as indispensable, trustworthy, and loyal, all the while suppressing evidence, altering records, and gaslighting anyone who came too close to the truth. And when the DNA bombshell detonates, Claire's carefully polished facade cracks, because she can no longer control the narrative, and one by one her lies are dragged into the light, including her knowledge of the switched records, her interference in the adoption files, and her deliberate efforts to keep Victoria and Audra apart, not out of pure malice at first, but out of fear that the truth would erase her place, her importance, and the life she fought to build. Yet fear curdled into cruelty, and cruelty into manipulation, until the damage became irreversible, and as Victor Newman learns the truth, his reaction is chillingly complex. Because while he is furious at being deceived, he must also confront his own complicity in a system that allowed such a secret to survive for decades, forcing him to ask whether his obsession with control and legacy indirectly cost his daughter the chance to raise her own child, while Nikki, torn between loyalty to Victoria and empathy for Audra, becomes the emotional bridge no one knew they needed, urging compassion where rage threatens to consume everything, even as Nick and Adam react in wildly different ways, with Nick focusing on protecting Victoria and demanding accountability from Claire, while Adam, ever the outsider, sees Audra's pain reflected in his own history and becomes an unexpected ally to her, complicating alliances and igniting new tensions, especially when business interests collide with personal truths, because Newman Enterprises is never just a company. It is a battlefield where blood ties and boardroom betrayals intertwine. And Audra's status as Victoria's daughter changes everything, including corporate power dynamics, inheritance implications, and Victor's long-term strategy, turning Audra from a threat into a potential heir, a possibility that terrifies some and infuriates others, while Audra herself rejects the idea of being absorbed into the Newman machine without acknowledgement of the years she spent alone, struggling and fighting, demanding truth before forgiveness and respect before reconciliation, and as Claire's lies fully unravel, she faces isolation, legal consequences, and the brutal reality that the very people she tried to control now see her clearly, not as a victim of circumstance, but as an active architect of deception, and yet even then, the young and the restless refuses to paint anyone in simple colors, because Claire's breakdown reveals a woman shaped by fear, abandonment, and desperation, mirroring the same wounds carried by Audra and Victoria in different forms, reinforcing the show's core truth that pain echoes across generations when secrets replace honesty, and as Genoa City reels, relationships fracture and reform in unexpected ways, with Victoria struggling to redefine herself not just as a CEO and a Newman, but as a mother to a daughter who grew up without her, questioning whether she has the right to claim Audra now that the truth is known, while Audra wrestles with whether blood alone is enough to forgive years of absence, manipulation, and rivalry. And every glance between them is charged with unspoken grief and tentative hope, as past confrontations take on new meaning and old wounds bleed anew, setting the stage for a future filled with emotional confrontations, power struggles, and fragile attempts at connection. Because this DNA bombshell doesn't just expose a secret, it redefines identity, loyalty, and legacy, proving once again that in the young and the restless, the truth always comes at a cost, and when it finally surfaces, it changes everything, leaving Genoa City forever altered and reminding everyone that no lie, no matter how deeply buried, can stay hidden forever. As the fallout continues to ripple outward, the DNA revelation doesn't merely settle into shock and whispered conversations. It metastasizes into every corner of Genoa City, infecting friendships, romances, rivalries, and corporate loyalties with doubt and raw emotion, because once the impossible becomes true, nothing feels stable anymore. And Victoria Newman quickly learns that discovering Audra is her daughter is only the beginning of a far more painful journey, one that forces her to confront not just what was stolen from her, but what she herself became in the years that followed, as guilt claws at her with every memory of how harshly she judged Audra, how ruthlessly she tried to block her rise, how personally she took Audra's ambition without ever realizing she was staring at a mirror forged by the same blood and the same unhealed wounds, and in quiet moments when Victoria is alone, the power suit discarded and the boardroom bravado stripped away, she relives moments she once dismissed as coincidence. Audra's defiance, her refusal to bow, her instinctive understanding of the Newman mindset, and now those memories cut deeper because they are no longer abstract echoes but proof of a bond denied, while Audra, on her own path of reckoning, begins to unravel the story of her life through an entirely new lens, questioning the narratives she built to survive, the anger she clung to as armor, and the belief that she was unwanted because knowing Victoria is her mother doesn't magically erase the pain of abandonment, it sharpens it, transforming vague resentment into something far more personal and devastating, and the knowledge that Claire played a deliberate role in keeping them apart adds a layer of betrayal that Audra struggles to process without exploding, yet instead of lashing out immediately, Audra does something no one expects. She goes quiet, retreating inward, recalibrating, because this truth is too big to weaponize impulsively, and Audra Charles has never survived by acting without strategy. Meanwhile, Claire's unmasking becomes a slow-motion collapse, because once one lie is exposed, the rest follow like dominoes, and people begin to realize just how often Claire positioned herself at the center of crucial moments, how frequently she redirected suspicion, softened facts, or conveniently lost documents, and the chilling realization dawns that Claire didn't just lie once or twice. She curated reality itself, shaping outcomes with surgical precision, and when confronted, she initially clings to denial, insisting she was protecting everyone, insisting that revealing the truth would have destroyed lives. But those justifications crumble under scrutiny, because the destruction happened anyway, just stretched across decades instead of detonated in one moment. And as legal threats loom and alliances evaporate, Claire finds herself utterly alone, forced to confront the truth she avoided the longest. That everything she built was rooted in fear, not strength, and fear never creates anything that lasts. The emotional epicenter of the story, however, remains the painfully tentative interactions between Victoria and Audra, because their first real conversation after the DNA confirmation is not a tearful reunion but a battlefield of restrained emotion, where every sentence is measured, every pause loaded with unsaid accusations, and Victoria, used to commanding rooms, finds herself powerless. Because no corporate authority can force forgiveness, and when she finally says the words, "I am so sorry," they sound insufficient even to her own ears, while Audra responds not with comfort or rage, but with brutal honesty, laying bare the years she spent wondering why she was discarded, why she had to fight harder than everyone else, why she always felt like she was clawing her way towards something just out of reach. And Victoria listens, truly listens, for perhaps the first time, realizing that being Audra's mother now means absorbing pain she can never undo, only acknowledge, and that realization humbles her in a way no business loss ever could. As the Newman family struggles to adjust, Victor's strategic mind goes into overdrive, because he understands that this revelation is not just emotional dynamite but a seismic shift in the balance of power, and while he claims to prioritize family unity, his instincts betray him as he begins calculating how Audra fits into the legacy, how her intelligence and ruthlessness could be harnessed, and whether embracing her publicly could strengthen the Newman empire or fracture it beyond repair. And this puts him on a collision course with Victoria, who, for once, draws a line he cannot cross, making it clear that Audra is not an asset, not a chess piece, not a contingency plan, but a daughter who deserves agency, and this rare defiance from Victoria signals a profound change, one that doesn't go unnoticed by Nikki, Nick, or Adam, each of whom processes the situation through the prism of their own scars, with Nick acting as moral anchor, urging patience and transparency, while Adam, ever complicated, grows closer to Audra through shared understanding of what it means to be both inside and outside the Newman family simultaneously, a connection that sparks rumors, jealousy, and speculation, especially as business and personal loyalties blur in classic Genoa City fashion. The corporate consequences escalate rapidly, because Audra's lineage cannot remain secret for long, and when it becomes public, the media frenzy is relentless, framing Audra alternately as a long-lost heiress, a corporate opportunist, or a pawn in a Newman power play, and Audra despises all of it, rejecting interviews and refusing to let the narrative be dictated by anyone else. While Victoria grapples with the public scrutiny of a past she thought was buried, enduring questions about her fitness to lead, her judgment, and her history. Yet through the storm, something unexpected happens. Victoria begins to loosen her grip on control, realizing that authenticity, not dominance, is the only way forward if she hopes to build anything real with Audra. And this evolution shocks those who know her best, because it signals that motherhood, even rediscovered motherhood, is reshaping her more profoundly than any merger or acquisition ever did. Claire's story, too, takes a darker, more introspective turn as she faces the consequences of her actions, and stripped of allies and excuses, she is forced to confront the parallels between herself and the very people she manipulated, recognizing too late that her fear of being erased led her to erase others, and in moments of raw vulnerability, she admits that she believed she was preventing catastrophe, that she convinced herself lies were kinder than truth, and while those admissions do not absolve her, they complicate the narrative, reminding everyone that monsters are rarely born. They are made through neglect, secrecy, and survival instincts gone wrong, and whether Claire finds redemption or sinks further into self-destruction remains an open question, one that keeps Genoa City watching closely. As weeks pass, the relationship between Victoria and Audra evolves in fragile, uneven steps, marked by awkward silences, tentative gestures, and moments of unexpected connection, such as shared memories of music, instincts, or values they didn't realize they shared. And these glimpses of harmony are both comforting and painful because they highlight what was lost as much as what might still be possible. And Audra remains cautious, refusing to rush into a role she doesn't fully understand, insisting on defining the relationship on her own terms, a stance Victoria respects even when it hurts, because she knows that earning Audra's trust will take time, patience, and consistency, virtues she is still learning to prioritize. Ultimately, this DNA bombshell reshapes the emotional landscape of the young and the restless in profound ways, reinforcing the show's enduring themes of identity, legacy, and the cost of secrets, as characters are forced to confront the consequences of choices made long ago, and viewers are reminded that truth is never clean, never painless, but always transformative. And as Genoa City settles into a new normal forged by revelation rather than illusion, one thing becomes clear. Victoria, discovering Audra is her real daughter, is not an ending but a beginning, a seismic shift that opens the door to redemption, reckoning, and reinvention, while Claire's exposed lies serve as a cautionary tale about the fragility of lives built on deception, ensuring that the echoes of this revelation will be felt for years to come, because in this world, blood may bind, lies may divide, but truth, once unleashed, reshapes everything it touches, leaving no heart unchanged and no future untouched. And even as the initial shock begins to settle, the emotional aftershocks refuse to fade, because the truth about Victoria and Audra does not exist in isolation. It rewrites history, reframes every past confrontation, and casts long shadows over moments once dismissed as coincidence or rivalry, and nowhere is this more evident than in the small, quiet scenes where Victoria catches herself watching Audra from across a room, seeing not a threat or a rival but a daughter shaped by absence. And those moments are almost unbearable for Victoria, because they are filled with what-ifs that can never be answered, while Audra, perceptive as ever, feels the weight of that gaze and struggles with the uncomfortable reality of being wanted now, after years of fighting to be seen at all, and this tension creates a fragile dance between them, one step forward, two steps back, as they learn that healing is not linear and forgiveness cannot be demanded on a timetable. The ripple effects extend into romantic entanglements as well, because Audra's emotional vulnerability makes her dangerous to herself in ways no one anticipated, and those closest to her sense that she is standing at a crossroads, torn between letting someone truly see her or retreating into the armor that has always protected her, and Victoria, watching from a distance, feels an almost instinctive maternal fear when she sees Audra isolate herself, yet she resists the urge to intervene, knowing that overstepping could push Audra further away, and this restraint marks one of Victoria's most profound transformations, as she learns that love is not control but presence, not ownership but patience. Meanwhile, the Newman family continues to fracture and realign under the weight of the revelation, as Victor's authority is quietly challenged not through rebellion but through emotional defiance, because for the first time, his children are united in pushing back against his tendency to strategize human beings, and this subtle shift signals a generational reckoning, where legacy is no longer defined solely by power and dominance, but by accountability and truth, and Victor, ever pragmatic, begins to realize that the empire he fought so hard to build may not survive unless it evolves, a realization that unsettles him more than any corporate threat ever could. Claire's shadow lingers even as she fades from the center of the story, because the damage she caused cannot be undone with apologies or explanations, and yet her absence becomes its own haunting presence, a reminder of how easily lives can be derailed when fear is allowed to masquerade.